My name is Constance Tsang. I am the writer and director of Blue Sun Palace. I am here with MUBI and Posteritati to talk about some of my favorite films and also movie posters. I must say I've watched this film once a year since I was 16. I'm in like my 30s now, and it's still kind of like this comfort film for me. And the moment in this poster is really, I guess, the turning point of the entire film, where we have these essentially two people who are connecting and finding this moment of realization, and yet they are so tormented by this realization. And I feel like the space between them is, of course, like extremely palpable, but also the way that the shadow is creating this sort of very literal jail of emotions is so deeply felt that I think this frame is really saying so much for the poster and what this film represents. So for me, it's really about the composition, the body language, and I think having this distance really makes this image really charged. I know lots of people talk about the end sequence of this movie, which I agree. It is I think a catharsis of what Mei Lan is going through. But I think this movie for me and what this poster represents is actually the opening sequence. And I think that opening sequence is so well crafted and so tight and sets up the story in a way that, I don't know, I think there's a lot of magic to it. Really briefly, the opening sequence is, I think, like an entirely there's no dialogue in it, and it's literally Li Kangshen discovering keys to an apartment. And we don't know who is living inside the apartment, only that it is empty, as we discover. And I think that sort of like inventiveness is symbolized so well by these three doors, because it ultimately represents, I think, Li Kangshen and also the two characters that become, in this weird way, entangled in the singular location. And all of them are essentially trying to find some sort of connection with each other. And at the core of it is this wounded heart. I love that it's watercolor because it feels like it's kind of seeping out in a way that can't be controllable, but the minimalism of the poster kind of keeps it, gives it a sort of like boundary. And I think that also evokes Chai Ming Lang's visual style. This poster, for me, it's playful. It has a lot of literally heart. And I think it reminds me of really the best parts of the film and the sort of primal aspect of the role that sex plays into the film, and also as a part of this poster, is really interesting, because at the end of the day, I think this film for me is really trying to talk about how these feelings are trying to get out in some way, but still imprisoned. The film itself, I think, is based on the Tolstoy short story Forged Coupon. And something about the film itself where I guess it's really that last sequence for me that really makes it sort of a cinematic masterpiece. And the way that the murder is handled, where the scenes itself are so striking and so blunt, and it's shot in a way where you don't actually see the murder happen, but you're experiencing through this really cacophony of editing and sound and a dog running through the hall. That is just brilliant to me. And so I think about that final sequence extremely often. And I think the core of the film and the thematics, the plot is so relevant today, I must say. And money is always something that I think about in terms of how characters are interacting with one another. Even in Blue Sun Palace, that was the core of a lot of how I gave actors their sort of intention and their catalyst to why they do the things that they do. And so that theme really runs through, I think, Jeanne as well. And this press book is really interesting to me. It symbolizes the film so well. There is, of course, like money that plays a huge role in the film, but it acts as a monster. And the playfulness, I must say, is something that really surprises me because of how austere, I would say, L'Argent is. So that is why I chose it, because I love the contrast and I love the sort of way, I love how this piece is really getting to the core of what the film is. I first encountered 8.5, I think, when I was around 15, and I had really no sort of, I watched it for the images, and it was a film that I didn't really know what it was about until much later on. And over the years, I've rewatched this film, and even during film school, it became a film of importance to me. And I remember watching the film and literally writing down every single shot because I wanted to know how this film worked and how all the cinematography and how all the editing worked together, because there is such, I think, brilliance to the movement, the camera work, the way that the surreal images are really intertwined with what's happening in Guido's presence. And something that really struck out for me is also his relationship with the women in his life that continually to haunt him and represent, I guess, the darker sides of what he's going through, especially with this writer block that is so well encapsulated by this, I guess, illustration. The image itself, I think, is really striking to me in terms of the way that there is a clown in the mind of this man, and the sort of nightmarish quality of it that is really, I think, being targeted to what Guido's internal mindset is very interesting. And I feel like with a design like this, it's not necessarily about representing the film in its most truthful manner in terms of what the plot is or anything like that, but understanding the film and the sort of emotionality that I think it can kind of come across, the things that are inexpressible. And that's what this poster really says to me and really makes me feel. This film is probably one of my favorite films of all time. And I had also come across it in my early 20s, and I feel like a lot of these films for me, even when we're kind of talking through all the posters, they of course like mean something for me, but this film in particular really, I think, changed the way that I understood cinema and time and how women's work, I think, can be portrayed. And that is something that I took with me when I was making Blouson Palace. When we were talking about images that really capture the essence, this is another one of them. We have Delphine sitting in this particular pose. Everything in front of her is so neatly placed. And the way that she's looking at them and the sort of tormented despair that I feel from looking at her in this film and the sort of controlled chaos that this frame really gives me is something that I took away from the film. And I took away the sort of I think contrast between the actions of Jeanne Dielman and also the release that comes with it at the end. It is a moment that feels so incredibly grand, and this breath of this sort of explosion that I have never been so enthralled before as I was watching it for the first time, that a film can do that to you. And I think that also has to do with the way that it plays out in real time, the sort of duration of the entire film, and how an edit can be built through these sort of not necessarily small movements, but seeing a character just be in a space and have a moment that changes everything. That is another way to make a movie. And that's what I took away and tried to do in making Blouson Palace. Thank you, MUBI and Posteritati, for having me talk through some of my favorite films and some of my favorite posters. This film, Blouson Palace, will be on MUBI, and it is available to stream.